So I'm looking at the top 10 tips if you've got friends coming round for a cup of tea. And my first tip is about having a tray ready. It's not just that it's practical and cuts down time and you're not faffing around in the cupboard while the guests are waiting. It's actually a nice thing to have as a sort of welcoming, I'm going to spend time with you moment for the beginning of your tea party. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2, when you're making tea, when friends have come round, wait for it. We're not supposed to reboil the water that's already in the kettle that you boiled earlier and have some left. We are meant to fill fresh water every time we boil the kettle for our cups of tea. It's to do with removing the oxygen and having a less good quality cup of tea. Now, I went to tea at a tea blender's house. They sell tea, we do too actually, but they sell tea, they're complete experts in it, and they used filtered water, freshly boiled each time. And I have to tell you, it was the best cup of tea I've ever had. So try it both ways. See if you can taste the difference between oxygenated and deoxygenated water. So the next tip number 3, when you've got friends coming round and you want to know about making them the nicest cup of tea possible, have good quality tea. It can be tea bags. Loose leaf tends to overall be better quality, so go for a good one. Preferably when you hold up the tea bag, it doesn't look like dust inside it. That is not considered to be the best quality. Something that looks like actual leaves. That's good. My 4th tip for making a marvellous cup of tea when friends come round: do not boil the kettle. So if you've been brought up like I have, it was always waiting for the kettle to be at the boiliest boil moment and then you'd pour it onto the tea. And apparently that's not right, especially if you've gone to the trouble of getting good quality tea. So you are meant to catch the water just pre-boil or just post-boil, but not that whole business of it being an absolute rolling boil at the moment. It's to do with scalding the tea. Apparently the same applies to coffee as well. So just pre-boil. We're not talking lukewarm, we're talking really, really hot, or just post-boil. That's the next tip. Okay, I am up to tip number 5. Well, do you know about warming the pot? Actually, most people don't even use a teapot these days. I would recommend it, particularly if you've got friends round. Putting a tea bag in each one, especially if there's 3 or 4 of you, is not so good as just putting a couple of tea bags into a teapot. And what we should be doing, have you heard the expression about warming the pot? So you take the lid off, you'd pour in some hot water, you'd swirl it around, you'd pour it away, and then it's ready for the tea to go in, particularly the tea leaves, if that's what you're using. Though if it is what you're using, you're going to need a strainer of some kind. So really it's about warming the pot, and use a teapot if you possibly can. It actually is better, it's quicker to pour 3 or 4 cups from a teapot than to individually deal with each tea bag. I do recommend that. And there's something lovely about being mother when they say, shall I be mother? There's something rather nice about that. So number 6 is about steeping the tea. So there's a difference between steeping it for a couple of minutes or so and letting it turn to treacle. But on the other hand, you don't want to pour it immediately when it's had no chance to do any brewing. Do give it some time. In some of the London hotels, they go up to 4 or 5 minutes. It can depend on the tea blend you're using. That's number 6. Number 7. This is about the best manners if people are coming round for tea and you pour the tea in first. So you haven't got milk in the cup. You pass them the cup with the milk and the sugar and the teaspoon for them to add whatever they want to it. So this was number 7, pour the tea in without the milk in, but pass the milk and the sugar to the guests. That's considered the most polite way. It's partly because as they add the milk, if they want it, they can choose how much milk to add depending on how strong your brew is. Because somebody might go, oh, just a dash of milk, please, if you're doing it. But then it'll arrive at them and it'll be far too dark for their taste. Anyway, the posh way is tea first, pass the milk over. All right, we're up to number 8. If you've got more than one guest, if you've got several, what we're meant to do is pour a cup of tea and pass the cup and saucer to guest number 1 with the milk and the sugar. Then you pour number 2, pass it to guest number 2, milk and sugar, or they'll pass the milk and sugar on. It's about individually pouring for each guest, as opposed to going ch, ch, ch. We're not meant to do the multiple pour. Now, obviously, if you've got a women's group of 34 people round, that might mean you've got to take any measures you can. But polite tea behaviour is to pour each cup and pass it over. It's like you're doing an act of kindness to each guest. Are you ready for another one? Okay, I've got 2 more, which is, did you know that we're supposed to stir it backwards and forwards? We've mentioned this before here. Round and round is what most people do. Nobody's going to judge on it, but if you really wanted your best posh manners, it's backwards and forwards. And we've said before, that's to do with sugar. The custom of adding really hard lumps of sugar in Victorian times, doing this direction would just send the sugar cube on a lumpy journey, and this would dispatch it. And it's still considered to this day the elegant way. I've got one more for you. If you've got friends coming round for a cup of tea, it's going to be a lovely moment because you've all taken time out. So I think you need to have some treats. It can even be biscuits, cookies. They do not have to be homemade. It's just a question of, let's have time together. Let's have a treat together. Let's have a pause on the madness of life. So I recommend having a few treats up your sleeves that they might like to eat. So there are my top 10 tips if friends are popping round for a cup of tea. And I hope that you get friends that drop in soon for tea, because it's a special way to spend time with people we enjoy the company of. And I hope that happens for you.